Trauma. Everyone has it. No one talks about it. It seems easier to stay silent, ignore it, or stuff it than it does to honor it, learn from it, and finally heal. Trauma is debilitating, yet so often we suffer in silence. Trauma is not meant to be battled alone, and we are no longer going to suffer in silence. Together, we are creating a safe place to speak, to share our stories, and grow our strength as we heal. Together, we are giving a voice to those who have been silenced, bringing darkness into light, and letting God use our stories. Today, we find ourselves again. We relight our spark and let it light up the world. Stop SIS is a nonprofit organization dedicated to educating on issues of trauma and trafficking, as well as the amazing power of the healing journey. Welcome to Stop SIS.
Hey, you guys, it's Denise Walsh and Rachel Timothy. We are here with Stop Suffering in Silence, which we were just joking about is like, does that mean we suffer out loud?
Join us.
Join us as we suffer out loud. Yes, I mean, our goal here is to create awareness of trauma and trafficking situations and what our kids are going through today and what we have experienced, and we're bringing it to light, but we're also empowering on the healing journey. So hopefully our conversations are not too, what's the word, sad. But I know sometimes they are, because it's the realities of what's happening. And so today we want to talk about some current events that happened even just yesterday near Nashville, Tennessee, and talk about how this ripple effect can impact our kids and schools all over the country. So, Rachel,
Yes.
what are you thinking?
So I feel like God has been putting just the heaviness of youth on my heart for the last couple of weeks anyway. Like, I mean, there's times when the world's evil. That growing up right now is just probably one of the hardest times in history to be a kid with all that they have coming at them. It feels like our kids are in the lion's den daily with so many different struggles and battles that they face. And so God has just been placing them on my heart so much lately. And I can share some of the experiences that I've had within the last couple of weeks that have done that. But yeah, what kind of brought it all to a head to where I really lost my holy discontent yesterday was finding out at a Christian school about 20 miles from where I live. It was a preschool through 6th grade. A shooter came in and killed 6 people, including 3 9-year-olds and 3 adults. And many more, I believe, were injured from my understanding. But
Do you know if the shooter is still alive?
Shooter was killed. That was not. So 7 technically dead. But this was the shooter apparently had gone to the school over a decade before and appeared to hold some bitterness and anger, I guess, towards the school, the church, because with it being attached to a church in general. Obviously, I don't know the specifics. I don't know what causes somebody to go to those lengths to do such horrible, evil things, other than Satan getting a hold of them in some way, shape, or form. But where my heart goes to the most is the families of those who lost loved ones.
Who most likely had nothing to do with any sort of resentment or anger, anything she would be mad about.
Correct. Nothing to do with it. For sure, not the 9-year-old kids.
Right.
And so, I mean, like I had a moment yesterday. So the shooting happened in the morning. And I was then going that afternoon to pick up my kids. And in the afternoon, I have to get there around 2-ish. And at that time, kindergarten's outside doing recess. And so I see my daughter out doing recess. And at the same time, I see a hospital helicopter fly overhead. And, you can't help but think, since with the shooting being just 20 miles from where I was, is that one of the kids? Your mind just goes to, it could have been right here. this could have happened right here. And, we see, or I saw the school's officer checking the perimeter, which, I mean, he's out some, but not like he was out yesterday. You could tell he was checking locks on the fence. And whenever they dismissed the kids, there was probably triple the amount of teachers out there with the kids. And I think it just rocked everybody that we have to be vigilant every single day because of the evil that is amongst our kids.
So I know they'll be dissecting this case for a while, trying to figure out what happened and why, and there's no ever good reason. But typically, mental illness, whether it's triggered by trauma or triggered by bullying or triggered by, or just on its own, I mean, who knows where it stems from sometimes, but it's like that. This is typically rooted in some sort of depression, self-image issue. When we talk about anger and resentment and grief and all of that stuff, we know that if we don't work on our healing journey, it's going to continue to fester. Not that most people don't go retaliate in this way,
Correct.
But it's just hard to understand.
And that's shoot, that's where me and Granny landed last night, is you can't understand this. As we were like processing some of this stuff, it gets to the point where you cannot understand, and you don't have the words to say to anybody who's hurting in this type of situation. All that you can trust and believe is knowing that God is with us in the midst of this pain, and he hurts with us.
Well, there's two things that I get on a bandwagon about. One is like the mental health crisis in America, right? I mean, I think we saw that through COVID, even like addiction was up, abuse was up, depression was up, loneliness was up, suicide rates were up, all of that kind of stuff. And a remedy, not necessarily the only remedy, but a remedy that can support the mental health of Americans is the security of the family unit, and like potentially even for security in communities, of having a place to belong, of having a place to feel like I can go be myself, or I can let my hair down. I don't know, but the family unit, I feel like, is a huge piece of the mental health puzzle.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I found it really interesting as I was kind of looking into more of this situation, and the shooter actually had left behind some letters or some text messages and different things. She basically had said, I'm going to die today, and you will probably see it on the news. But one thing that really caught my attention is she said, I have given plenty of hints of what's going on. And so, this, I guess what I'm trying to say goes out to both people who are suffering in silence and those who are on the outside watching. Little tiny signs maybe feel like a big sign to somebody who's struggling. And we want to like brush it under the rug or act like, well, they're not struggling as bad as maybe they're saying they are. We kind of want to sugarcoat things instead of just meeting it head on and dealing with the problem. And at the same time, if you are the person who feels like you've been giving hints, it's time to just speak it, because hints don't always get across. People don't always know what you mean and can't read your mind. And I've learned that in the process of walking through things with Granny, things that I feel like I said I didn't, but I thought I did, because what comes out my mouth and what is said in my head is sometimes two different things. But we can't suffer in silence and with this stuff. We've got to speak boldly if we're struggling, because the ripple effect is deadly.
Oh, it's horrifying. And to think this was an adult.
Yeah.
This wasn't an emotionally charged teenager. This was an adult who, if she needed help, one would think, well, go get help, go get resources, it feels like, as an outsider, right, you can say, well, these are all the things you do when you need help. But when you're the one suffering, those things seem huge and hard. So it would be interesting to see what she identifies as like a hint, because you're right.
It is, yeah.
Well, it feels like, here I am, I need help, but yet people don't pick up on you just wearing baggy clothes or
True.
not showering for 3 days. You know, they're in their own world, in their own space, and not necessarily wanting to put their judgments on people, right? We're taught not to do that. And so it'll be interesting to see as more things come out.
Yeah, or we classify it as, well, you're just being you. Well,
Right.
we won't even go there.
Yeah. And again, this is the why question is, I think that what happens when something like this happens, we say why, and then we say, what can we do?
Mhm.
And the what can we do is create as much love and space to either be somebody that people would hint to potentially, or create security in our own family unit, to create as many stable children as we can.
Right. Yeah. So that kind of leads me into one of the other struggles that I feel like is massive with our kids right now, and it's bullying and also suicide. And I think the just from seeing it within my own kids, um, I don't know that I was ever bullied growing up. Maybe comments were said. Maybe I was the type of kid that for whatever reason it didn't sink in. But for one of my kids, it sinks in and it chips away at her major. And she literally has been crying daily over things said to her at school, and she no longer likes herself. She has said she's thought about not wanting to be alive. And so this has kind of brought up that holy anger towards humanity at times when I see her hurting like this. But I know she's not the only one. You hear of it all the time. And I wanted to share with you guys. So I just so happened the day before my little girl came to me and was talking to me about some of the things going on at school, I came across a post on Facebook from a mom, and her son's name was Aiden Reese. And she shared a text message conversation between him and her where he was saying, "Mom, I just want to take a year off baseball." And she wrote back, "Don't do it." And he said, "Mom." And she said, "Give it a week and just see." He said, "You don't even care. I get bullied by my own teammates. It's a waste of money and time. I'm just going to be harassed nonstop." And she said, "You are not a quitter." He said, "Mom, please." He ended up committing suicide the next day. And she posts on there about how she thought she was, teaching him how to keep with your commitments. You committed to this team. You made that commitment. You need to stick with it to the end. You are not a quitter. Like, those are all things that we're taught. And I've had my kids asked to quit things before, and I've said, "No, you have made this commitment." And so it just makes it more eye-opening to think we need to be more focused on what the heart of the issue is with our kids. When something is a big deal to them that maybe wouldn't be a big deal to an adult brain, but it is to a child's brain, we have to take that seriously, because there are so many unfortunate resources to these kids on how to commit suicide these days. I was talking to somebody earlier today, and she said she had just heard how as soon as like a teenager gets on TikTok, within 10 minutes, the algorithm makes it to where they are flooded with how to commit suicide and why to commit suicide. That is the way the algorithm is set up for our teens. It's sickening, but Satan is alive and attacking.
That's horrible. And so my psychology self, like, I go to the victim, but more often I go to the bully. Like, what the heck is going on with these bullies? What the heck is going on to create, like, what insecurity do they have to feel like they have to better up themselves by pushing other people down? Like, where does that come from?
Yeah. Well, I mean, great questions. And you hope that the parents are doing the digging and the working on that stuff. And you hope that the school is working on those things. But a lot of that's with outside your control. I know when I called up to the school then to discuss the bullying, number one, I was told it is not legal for me to know what the punishment for the other kid will be. I'm not allowed to know that. But as I was talking to somebody who works in the school system, she told me if bullying continues, and this is something I want all of you guys to know, if bullying continues, you are allowed to get a no contact order within the school. I did not know that. So if this does continue, I will ask the school to give her and this particular bully a no contact order. And then I can also request him not to be in any of her classes next year because of the bullying. And so
Excellent.
I will be doing those things.
Excellent. Absolutely. I also think, I mean, if you know who it is, can you connect with the parents?
Possibly. Possibly. I mean, I hadn't thought of that. I don't know very many people in my area yet or at the school.
Well, if you know the name of the person, and again, this is not necessarily the first inclination because nobody likes conflict. And
Right.
but if you think of, you have, if you know the name, you can go to the school register. Everybody's got a directory and you can find the parents, whether you text, email, or call. And you can say, my child is coming home and sharing this information with me. And I'm wondering what we can do to ensure that it stops. Because as a parent, as a healthy parent, if my child were being a bully, heck yeah, I want to know.
Right. Oh, for sure.
And I don't want to sugarcoat it. And of course, I will always think he's the best because I do. But I have high expectations of his behavior. Right.
Right.
And so as a parent, I would want to know. And if the school isn't communicating as well, then maybe that's obviously we need to do it in a way that's respectful and not confrontational because that goes nowhere. But as parents, I wonder if we need to be talking to each other as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Of course, the alternate side of that is the reason why he's a bully is because his parents don't care. And they're not going to care. And they're going to say, he's being bullied at home. That's why he's being bullied. You know what I mean? Like whatever the case may be. But I do think it's interesting to open the conversational doors.
I agree. And then you shared a reel recently about the importance of building up our kids' self-esteem and pouring into them that way so that they're able to fight off and battle some of these things when they're at school.
Yeah, I think that is my ideal world. When we do our life purpose exercises, we always talk about what is your ideal world? And in my ideal world, we all know how awesome we are, and we don't have these emotional strings that can be pulled by other people, whether it's something in our past that still pulls on us, when we're triggered, it's something that we still haven't healed from, or a fear we have of the future when we're triggered in that way. But I think often when we're feeling insecure, we're more apt to give in to these either temptations or to be triggered by these bullies or to be swept up by their, words of praise because we feel like we need it. And so building that inner strength is crucial.
Yes. It's like how I think you gave me this illustration once and then I saw it again recently. If I were to say to you, I hate your blue hair, that won't bother you because you don't have blue hair. You are strong in knowing who you are. And so if our kids know who they are in God and who they are to us, when somebody says they aren't those things, they'll laugh it off because you're wrong. My mom says I'm amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to travel a lot for work. I traveled once a month and I would have this insecurity of being a bad mom because it was boys' weekend. I mean, my boys were small. They were toddlers at that age. And so I felt guilty for leaving Brandon with the boys. And we would have my sister-in-law come for the weekend. And long story short, it turns out to be they love boy weekends and they have a great relationship with their aunt because of this time, and it turns out to be great. But I'm experiencing guilt about leaving. So then if somebody says to me, man, you travel a lot, I immediately go,
Mhm.
you know, I'm a bad mom, or, you know, go down that spiral.
Mhm.
Well, over time, when I'm realizing, wait a minute, I'm home every day. I pick them up
Mhm.
every day from school. Like, this is not a lot of time. And they actually love, you know, these dad weekends. I grew in that strength. And when people started saying that, oh, you travel a lot, I was like, yeah, my boys love their boy weekends. And
Yeah.
it didn't emotionally pull me anymore. So just another example of when we know who we are and we believe in ourselves, then those things don't derail us as much. So how can we build inner strength in our kids?
Right. Yeah, I mean, so and I shared this with you recently, and it's silly, but to me it kind of hit home where they were talking about how they learned their best parenting advice from a dog.
Yeah, I've seen that one. That's one of my, that's actually, so you'll explain it, but this is a marriage and family therapy technique. It's called
Oh,
the,
wait, I got to use it in marriage too.
yeah, totally. Yeah.
Shoot.
But this is a marriage and family therapy technique. It's called the hellos and the goodbyes. So explain it. Mhm.
Okay, so basically what I saw was they said, you know how a dog loves you so much that when you walk in the door, I mean, they go crazy and they love on you like crazy, like it's this huge celebration of getting to see you. It was saying when your kids walk in the door, be a dog and be so excited to see them, like celebrate it, give them praise, like you just because at the end they feel adored,
Mhm.
and that builds up this worth in them that is priceless. But then at the very end it said, but do it when they're young, because then when they become teenagers they turn into cats, and cats don't like dogs. But um
True. That's true. But every morning, you know, morning hugs, like, hey, good morning. How'd you sleep? Like all of that makes such a big difference. And you think of this with, I mean, whether you're coming in the door, whether you're, I mean, how many, I know of couples when the couple answers, they go, huh, you know, like your hellos and your goodbyes, they matter in your relationships
Yes.
because it can either bring somebody up or make them feel unwanted.
Yeah, exactly right. So, I mean, I think that's part of it. Just, showing them that you do adore them, that they are not an inconvenience, a burden. Um, because, I mean, like we have a big family, we have 4 kids, and it can get chaotic. And I think also just having time of aloneness with them. And I mean, right now, my 9-year-old, well, honestly, every single one of my kids, they will purposefully seek out alone time with me and will get upset if somebody comes into that moment. And it doesn't have to be long, but they just want to share their heart for 10 minutes and have somebody who listens.
Mhm.
And I'm not by any means perfect at any of this stuff. In fact, I feel like for years, part of the reason probably why my kids struggle with confidence and such is because I was a dissociative parent. I mean, I was there, but I wasn't there. I was dealing with so many of my own flashbacks and triggers and traumas that I was lucky to even just be sitting there with them, but I wasn't really there. And I think those years impacted my kids, and I'd be nuts to say that it didn't. But I'm going to do my best to make up for it now. And I'm trying to be as intentional as I can in listening and loving on them and pouring into them as much as I can.
Yeah. I remember, this is funny. I remember at my church growing up, I don't remember who this person was. I don't remember her name, but I know every single time she saw me, she lit up and she would go, hey, how are you? And
Aw.
she would ask, because I think she, from what I'm like kind of remembering, I think that in middle school and stuff, she graduated. And so she'd come back to visit. And every time she saw me, she felt like it was like this warm, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I get to see you again. And I remember that feeling. And I
Yeah,
remember feeling like important in the,
exactly.
even in just that moment.
Right. And I think those healthy moments are fantastic. Of course, in my mind, you're like, okay, watch out for predators who do that because they will do the same thing. But
Fascinating.
sorry,
Wow.
just kick the air out of you there.
Yeah.
Not that she was a predator, but I'm just saying.
No, I don't even remember her name, but you're right. I think that is probably why predators do the things they do, is because they know that it makes people feel special.
Yeah.
So with that being said, we've talked a lot about, I mean, even just a couple of weeks ago, we talked about online predators, and I know you've had recent experiences with that. So it's building that inner strength from people they do trust, but also being able to create the space when weirdos are coming in. How can they decipher who to trust and who not to trust, and what do they do? So tell us that story.
Tell you what story?
Your predator story, your online predator story.
Oh, with my daughter?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well,
Oh,
I think
that was my segue. Was it not good?
I thought we'd already talked about that on here, but maybe not.
Okay.
Well, so yeah, my daughter 2 times now has oh, I know what you mean. You want me to talk about the oh, okay.
Yes.
Sorry. So, my daughter, this is the bad part. Start with the bad, we'll end with the good. Has twice now been talking to people online who were strangers, which I am learning the reason that she was doing it, even though she knew she was not allowed to. And even though they were on apps that were like kid apps and not apps like Snapchat or TikTok or anything that you would think could potentially be dangerous. She was doing it because she was lonely. She was doing it because of the bullying at school. But she had some conversations with people she didn't know, and by golly, if not one or two at a time would pop on as an adult and say absolutely awful things to her. Teaching, like telling her what sex is, and telling her, like asking her where she lives and wanting, to come see her and things like that. And of course, she's 9 years old and really didn't want anything to do with that. She just wanted a friend. But she didn't tell us about it. She kept it in because I think a few reasons. She knew I would probably take her device away because mom is going to freak. And she knew that she knew it was wrong. She knew the conversation that was on there was wrong. And so I think there was a shame that started to build up. Anyway, we find out about it because we have become very good about checking devices as much as possible. And I see it, and we start to have the discussion. And she, you could just tell, felt defeated from the get-go. Like she knew it was wrong. She knew what he had said was wrong. But at the same time, it's like, no, this really isn't your fault. But we need to talk about how we can give you the strength to be able to tell us when it does happen. And over time, her and I kept talking. And boy, I feel like communication with your kid is maybe one of the number one things that I can say as far as keeping them safe. If that line of communication is always open, you're in a much better place. But we started talking about ideas, and we came up with an idea that we want to pursue, her and I together. And it's called Kid FBI Program. And the FBI stands for Fighting Back Initiative, and it's giving kids a chance to fight back against these predators online. And what we would love to do is to get into organizations that are working with kids, whether it's schools or churches or teams or camps. And basically, if a child is sent something inappropriate online, if they are to screenshot it and bring it into their participating group, whether it's the school or whatever, and show them the conversation, they're going to get rewarded. And my hope and plan is to have some sponsorships to where people, maybe if they can go to Pizza Hut and get a pizza, if they can go to McDonald's and get a Happy Meal, or Chick-fil-A and get a sandwich, something to where, because then in my mind we're fighting hunger and we're fighting predators, but it's a reward system, because then they're not going to feel that shame. They're going to be like, oh, I just caught a bad guy. Look. And then from there, we can take that information and give it to the police. And hopefully it would take down more of these predators and give these kids a feeling of empowerment, because they're doing something big.
Yeah. I think of the teenagers who get inappropriate messages and then hide them from their parents. And then we've heard of stories where then blackmail is a part of the process. So yeah, if you think of at a young age, instead of thinking I did something wrong and feeling shame and hiding it, being loud and saying, dude, this guy's a weirdo. And
Yep.
again, not getting roped into the conversation, but feeling like they can do something about it.
Exactly. And yeah, they should feel proud of themselves. They should feel stronger. Um, and I think it opens the eyes to the adults around them as well.
Right. Yeah, I think that's part of it, is educating the parents that this is happening, whether we like it or not. So we should probably educate our children.
Yeah. So, I mean, I picture myself going into schools and getting to do an assembly and getting to share about the dangers online and what that looks like and how we can fight back and, what the schools can do. And that is a dream that it's new. But when I see my little girl's face light up because she knows she's going to be a part of something big, well, yeah, we're going to do this, puppy, because it matters.
Yeah, it does. Well, and I know you were sharing it yesterday in our group, and one of the girls who's a teacher was like, yes, yeah, we need all the help we can get.
Oh, goodness. Yes, these kids, they need as much of that as possible.
Yeah.
So,
is there anything else that's brewing for you in your holy discontent of youth struggles?
I did have a thought earlier before the last question, and it was very important. I can't remember it now. Shoot. No, I can't remember.
We talked about bullying. We talked about online. We talked about mental health.
Yeah. Yep. It's not ringing a bell at the moment.
Okay.
So, but I mean, I just know that we're all in this together. We're all seeing these battles take place within our schools, all around us. I don't know, like there's a point where I get so dang frustrated at our country, so dang frustrated at the leaders. It feels like we're taking one step backwards, slowly enough to where we don't notice it in drastic measures, but now it's like, holy cow, look around, see what we're facing, see what our kids are facing. A lot of what our kids are, this was it, a lot of what our kids are going through, their brains are not developed to experience. A lot of what they experience on their phone, their brain is not developed enough to experience. And this thought came to my mind the other day, and I know that this will never happen. But just like how cigarettes have an age limit, alcohol has an age limit, because the child's brain is not developed enough to handle those things. In many ways, phones are the same way. Their brains are not developed enough to handle the evil that is on there, period. And I just think we're putting our kids in these adult situations way more than we realize, and expecting things to be fine and then being surprised when they're not.
Mic drop.
That was it. I told you it was important. I can't think of what it was at the time, but
well, and in the effort of what can we do, I think we've said a few things. It's communication as much as possible, which means communication about everything, not just the hard things. Because when the hard things come, if you're not in the mode of talking, my husband and I talk about this sometimes. He's like, well, why didn't you tell me? And I said, well, when was I going to tell you? When we pass each other in the kitchen? Like we need to have a routine space where we talk. So when hard things come, we have this routine space of talking. So whether it's before bed or going for a walk or taking the dog for a walk. I've said this before, but my son enjoys taking the trash out with me because we have a long driveway and I think it's hilarious. But it just reminds me, he likes the one-on-one time.
Yeah.
So creating that, however you do that. But then also it reminds me of teaching good coping skills, because I think that when these emotions come, they need an outlet, whether it's sports or journaling or music or whatever. And so when you're noticing a heightened emotion, teaching our kids how to handle that in a healthy way is important.
Yeah, so I got to share this story. I was sharing with you guys about my daughter and some of the intrusive thoughts she's been having. And so a couple nights ago, it kind of came to a head, and she was saying, she flat out told me, Mom, there's times I don't want to be alive. And there's times that she thinks people at school don't want her to be alive either. But just these intrusive thoughts. And of course, as a mom, you're like, oh my gosh, I have failed her. I felt terrible for her. It broke my heart that she was feeling those things, but thank God God put something in my mind that reminded me of my oldest son. And I knew he had been through similar intrusive thoughts in the past. And so I called him into the living room and I was like, hey, buddy, your sister's having some intrusive thoughts, kind of similar to what you've had in the past. And he's 11 and she's 9. And so, I'm not really sure how well this is going to go, but in my mind, I'm thinking they need each other. Like they are siblings this close in age for a reason. They're battling similar things. They need each other. And so I wanted to bring him in to kind of be a support for her, to help him realize how much he's needed and help her see that she has another person that she can feel loved by. Because a lot of times they're fighting. And so he's like, well, what thoughts is she having? And I said, well, she's having thoughts of not wanting to be alive. And he goes, oh, yeah, I've had those thoughts. I mean, just all nonchalant. And I'm like, yeah, buddy, I know you have. Would you have any tips to give to her? And by golly, if this 11-year-old kid didn't have 3 tips to give her, he said to her, number 1, don't brush it under the rug. When I tried to push it under the rug, the thoughts only got louder. And so acknowledge what you are feeling. Number 2, don't live there. Try to think of other things that make you happy. Try to, you can acknowledge it, but then move on from there. Don't let that consume all of your thoughts. And number 3, have a gratitude journal to where you write out the things that you're thankful for. And he's like, I do that every night. And he does legitimately. He has a gratitude journal that number 1, he writes out his intrusive thoughts, and then he follows it up with the things he's thankful for. And he told his little sister, because you cannot be anxious and thankful at the same time. And I'm like, this kid has been through a lot. I mean, he went on to share with her about how there was a time when he was so much struggling in his mind that he literally ran away from school. And she didn't know these stories. She didn't know how much he was struggling. And she was like, Mom, seriously? Like, yeah, those weren't easy days. But look at him now. Like, these are the tools that you can use that you have seen your brother at the exact same age use and get to where he is healthier now in his brain space. So it was a powerful moment in the end. And we all laughed and we all cried. And it was just a bonding experience. And who would have thunk that we would be bonding over the thought of not wanting to be alive? But because we didn't make it so extreme, like, who are you to think those thoughts? It was something we were able to talk about in a normal way.
I love that your son got to share his wisdom. I think when you can give back and feel like what you experienced has been helpful to someone else, it really grows your inner strength too.
Yeah, I agree. There's power in your testimony, even if you're 11.
So if you guys have ideas for how to teach kids positive coping skills and what to do when they've got heightened emotions, how to keep open doors of communication with our kids. So if and when something negative or like a bully or anything that's happening, they feel like they can talk to you. If you've got any thoughts, please post it below, comment below. We want to consistently learn together. We're not always, we don't know everything. So please feel free to share your wisdom as well.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Well, I feel like we need to end with an I declare, because like these tough conversations, right? All right. There's one that I like that. Ooh, this is a good one. I declare that I am calm and peaceful. I do not let people or circumstances upset me. I rise above every difficulty, knowing that God has given me the power to remain calm. I choose to live my life happy, bloom where I'm planted, and let God fight my battles. This is my declaration, and this is my declaration for you. Have an awesome day, you guys, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you so much for listening to this powerful episode of Stop Suffering in Silence. If you are interested in booking Rachel to speak at your school, your church, or on your podcast, then please email openblindeyes@protonmail.com. If you are interested in sponsoring a survivor on their healing journey and would like to donate to Stop SIS, then please check out the link in the description box or show notes below, or you can email stopsis@protonmail.com. And finally, if you are currently suffering in silence, or you know somebody who is, whether they're dealing with a current trauma or one from the past, then we will always recommend that you reach out to your local resources and find a counselor that you can trust, because nobody is meant to suffer alone. Have an amazing week, and thank you for being here.